The orchard lay just beyond the village walls, a stretch of land that seemed to breathe with its own rhythm. Rows of apple and pear trees stood in careful order, their branches heavy with fruit. In summer, the air there was thick with sweetness, the perfume of ripening skins, the hum of bees drifting lazily between blossoms turned to flesh. The people of the village tended it with steady hands and reverence. For generations, the orchard had fed them, clothed them in trade, and bound them together in labor. Men came at dawn with baskets, women with pruning knives, children skipping between the rows to gather fallen fruit. Every season followed the same pattern: blossoms, swelling fruit, the harvest, the quiet rest of winter. Nothing strayed from this cycle. The trees themselves seemed to share in the life of the people. Their trunks, knotted and strong, carried the memory of years untold. Their branches stretched out like arms that had grown accustomed to being climbed by children or shaken by calloused hands. When wind passed through them, the sound was not of mere leaves but of voices, rustling, murmuring, almost speaking. To the villagers, the orchard was more than food. It was a promise. It promised that work would bear reward, that labor would return sweetness, that each year's hunger would be answered by the trees. No one doubted this promise. It was as sure as sunrise, as certain as the turning of seasons. In the evenings, families walked the orchard paths, looking at the swelling fruit with pride. In the mornings, mist rose from the soil, curling between the trunks like pale smoke, and the villagers would say it was the breath of the earth itself blessing their labors. Nothing dark had ever touched that place. Not storm, not blight, not beast. The orchard belonged to them, and they to it, bound by trust. But trust, like fruit, is a fragile thing. And when it is broken, the branches remember. The night it came, the orchard lay in stillness. The air was heavy, the kind of summer night where the heat lingers even after the sun has fallen. Crickets sang from the hedges, and the branches of the trees hung low with fruit, their shadows swaying gently on the ground. Then the silence broke. A rustle stirred at the edge of the wood, low at first, then louder, as though something thick and unyielding pushed its way through brambles without care. Birds startled from their roosts, wings flashing pale in the moonlight as they fled deeper into the forest. The hedges shivered, and from them burst a shape that belonged to no tame field nor tended grove. It was a boar. Massive, broad-shouldered, with a hide scarred by years of battles unseen. Its tusks curved upward, pale in the moonlight, sharp as hooked blades. Its eyes glowed with a strange dull fire, not hunger alone but something heavier, older. Mud clung to its flanks, dried into cracked ridges along its hide, and each breath it drew came loud and harsh, steaming in the cool night air. The ground seemed to give way beneath its weight as it pushed deeper into the orchard. It did not hesitate, did not sniff the air as a deer might, nor creep cautiously like a fox. It entered as though it belonged, as though the orchard were nothing more than soil waiting to be overturned. The trees shivered. It was not the wind, for the air was still. The branches trembled faintly, though no hand touched them, no breeze stirred their leaves. The boar rooted at the earth with its tusks, tearing shallow furrows in the soft ground. It grunted, paced, pressed its bulk against the trunks, testing their strength. Yet it did not eat. It did not bite into fallen fruit, though the grass already held apples dropped from earlier days. It only circled, grunting, its presence heavy as a storm. The orchard, so long a place of order and peace, now carried another rhythm, the low, grinding breath of the beast. The villagers slept in their beds, unaware of the trespass. But the orchard itself felt it. And before dawn, it would answer. The boar lingered long beneath the orchard canopy. It moved slowly, circling, grunting, pressing its tusks into the soil as though searching for roots that were not there. Its heavy body brushed against the trunks, leaving streaks of mud on the pale bark. The night air was thick with its musk, a scent that clung to the leaves and seemed to weigh them down. The trees, once still, began to stir. At first, it was only the faintest tremor, a shiver in the highest branches. Leaves whispered though the air was unmoving. Then the sound deepened. The orchard seemed to murmur, wood against wood, as though the trees themselves were speaking in secret voices carried along their boughs. The boar rooted louder, scraping the ground with a grinding noise. In answer, the branches above began to shake, not in fear, nor in welcome, but in warning. One apple dropped, striking the earth with a dull thud. Another followed. Then a pear, its skin splitting open as it hit the soil. The boar paused, ears twitching, but did not feed. It snorted once, dismissive, and pressed forward. Then the trees gave way. With a sound like 1,000 sighs, the orchard loosed its burden. Apples and pears fell in torrents, striking the grass, rolling into the furrows, bruising and breaking under their own weight. Branches bent and emptied themselves, fruit raining down in the moonlight as though shaken by invisible hands. The boar stood in the midst of it, unmoved. It did not lower its head to the feast, did not claim what the trees had given. Instead, it grunted, a low, guttural sound, and moved on to the next row. The fruit continued to fall in its wake, until the ground was thick with it, littered with bruised skins and broken flesh. By the time the stars began to fade, the orchard floor was carpeted in fallen fruit. Not one tree stood unburdened. Their branches hung bare, trembling, stripped before their season. And still the boar had not eaten. It turned once, gazing back with dark, unreadable eyes, then vanished into the hedge, leaving silence behind. Only the orchard knew why it had surrendered its bounty before dawn. When the villagers woke, the orchard was not as they had left it. At first light, men carried their baskets and women led their children down the narrow paths, expecting to see branches bowed with ripening fruit. But as they turned the corner beyond the hedge, a gasp rose like a single breath drawn from 100 throats. The ground was covered. Apples, pears, all the fruit of the season lay scattered in heaps, bruised and broken. Some split open, their flesh already browning in the morning air. Others rolled into the furrows, crushed under the weight of those that fell after. What had taken months to ripen had been cast down in one night, wasted before it could be gathered. The villagers stood stunned. They bent to lift the fruit, but their hands came back sticky with juice and pulp. Flies had already found the orchard, crawling in thick black clusters on the sweetest pieces. The air was sour, heavy with the scent of rot where yesterday it had smelled of promise. Whispers spread quickly. "This is no storm," said one. "No wind could strip the trees so clean." "It is blight," said another. "Some curse has touched the branches." Others glanced toward the forest. "No, this is the mark of the beast. Something entered here in the night." And as if to confirm their dread, they found the furrows, wide gouges torn into the soil, prints pressed deep as bowls, the trail of something massive that had walked row by row. The word rose on every tongue, low and fearful. Boar. Some spat, cursing the animal. Others crossed themselves, whispering that such a creature was not merely flesh and blood. "No beast can command the trees," an elder murmured. "No tusk can make fruit fall before its time." But no one could deny what they saw. The branches, once heavy, now hung bare. The harvest, promised and certain, had been undone overnight. The villagers gathered in silence at the edge of the orchard, their baskets empty, their faces pale. The children clung to their mothers, staring at the ruined ground. Even the dogs, usually quick to bark, whined and slunk back toward the village. The orchard had always been faithful. But faith broken leaves fear in its place. In that morning, fear walked the lanes of the town as surely as the boar had walked the orchard. The villagers tried at first to save what they could. They came with baskets, with carts, with aprons held open to scoop the fruit from the ground. But the work quickly soured. The apples, bruised from their fall, split beneath the gentlest touch. Juice ran sticky across fingers and wrists, staining clothes, souring in the sun. Pears, once golden, now mottled with black, gave off a sickly sweetness that turned the stomach. Within hours, wasps swarmed the heaps, their bodies glinting in the light, their droning louder than the villagers' weary sighs. By midday, the stench of rot rose thick and choking. Piles of fruit sagged into mush, crawling with flies. The baskets filled, but each one carried more waste than food. The villagers' faces grew grim. They knew already what their hands confirmed: the harvest was ruined. Anger came next. Some blamed the boar. It came as a thief, one man spat. Its hoofs cursed the ground. Its presence poisoned the trees. Others shook their heads. No beast could do this. The trees chose to shed. They gave us their bounty, then spoiled it before we could touch it. The whispers grew darker. Perhaps it is not the boar we should fear, but the orchard itself. Perhaps it has turned against us. Neighbors began to mutter against neighbors. "You left your gate open," accused one. "You let the beast inside." "No," another retorted. "It is your sins that soured the branches. The orchard sees what we do in secret." Old grudges rose from their graves, sharpened by hunger and fear. That night, no family shared their bread. Each household clutched what little they had, suspicious of every other. The orchard, once the heart of the village, had become a wound, and from that wound spread distrust. The dogs barked uneasily toward the hedges. Children asked their mothers if the boar would return. The elders said nothing, but in their silence was a truth heavier than words. The harvest was gone. And the orchard was not done. The orchard did not rest. Though its branches were bare, stripped before their season, the villagers still went each morning to stare at what remained. Some hoped the trees might forgive and bear again. Others came only to watch, as one watches the grave of the newly dead. The air still carried the sour weight of rot, and the ground was thick with husks and cores, sinking into the soil as if the earth itself swallowed the spoiled harvest. Then, one night, the dogs began to howl. Their cries tore through the village, sharp and urgent. The people woke, hearts pounding, and hurried to their shutters. The moon hung low, and under its pale light they saw it again, the shadow moving at the hedge, heavy and slow. The boar. It entered the orchard as before, without fear, without haste. Its tusks glinted, its shoulders rolled like thunderclouds. The villagers clutched each other in their homes, whispering prayers, crossing themselves, but none dared to step outside. The boar did not eat. It did not root for scraps or gnaw at the rotting piles. Instead it moved row by row, circling the empty trees as it had circled the heavy ones before. Its breath steamed in the night, its hoofs pressed deep into the soil. Wherever it passed, the branches shivered. And though there was no fruit left to fall, still the trees trembled. Leaves loosed themselves, fluttering down like ashes. Bark cracked, sap bled, small twigs snapped and scattered. The orchard seemed to recoil at the beast's presence, as though something older than hunger stirred within it. The villagers watched from their windows, their faces pale in the moonlight. Mothers held their children close, fathers clenched their fists in helplessness. Some whispered, "It is no animal. It is a spirit in the shape of flesh." Others murmured, "It has come to claim what remains of us." When the boar reached the far edge of the orchard, it stopped. For a long moment it stood still, its eyes glinting like coals. Then it turned its head, slowly, toward the village. Though walls and doors stood between them, the people swore its gaze met theirs, heavy and unblinking. At last, with a grunt low as thunder, the boar pushed back into the hedge and vanished into the dark. But the silence it left was worse than its presence. The villagers did not sleep that night. They sat by their cold hearths, listening to the faint rustle of the orchard, wondering if the beast would come again, and whether the trees, or the village, would be the next to answer. The orchard never bore fruit again. Season followed season, yet the branches remained empty. In spring, blossoms came weak and pale, and before they could swell into fruit, they shriveled and fell to the ground. In summer, the leaves browned at the edges, whispering dry songs in the wind. By autumn, the air that once smelled of sweetness now smelled only of earth and rot. The villagers still went to the orchard, at first in hope, then in despair, and finally in silence. They touched the trunks as if begging forgiveness, but the trees gave nothing. What fruit had once promised life now lay only in memory, and memory could not feed them. The boar did not return. No hoofprint marked the soil again, no grunt rolled across the rows, no dark bulk shifted in the hedges. Some said it had wandered back into the deep forest. Others whispered it was never a beast at all, but judgment given shape. But whether animal or spirit, it had left behind a wound that would not heal. The village withered as the orchard had. Families grew thin. Some left, seeking land where the soil was kinder. Those who remained grew wary, suspicious, their voices sharp and their doors closed sooner each night. The laughter that once rose from harvest feasts was gone. Children, born after the fruit had fallen, grew up hearing the story again and again, of the night the boar entered, and how the trees dropped their fruit before dawn. For them, the orchard was not a place of promise but of warning. They walked its paths with bowed heads, careful not to break its silence. And the elders would tell them, with voices low, the orchard remembers. It remembers what we take, what we neglect, what we turn away. It gave once, and it gave again. But when the boar came, it showed us the cost. The orchard stood bare, row upon row of trees that had once been heavy with sweetness, now empty as bones. And the villagers lived in its shadow, knowing that sometimes abundance ends not with hunger taking, but with the earth refusing.